So now I'm gonna get ready to wire up the power cord. This will be the 110 application that's gonna supply power to this box to communicate to the shades down the road. Up here is going to be where your 110 power is going to be contained. There is a black cover that goes over this when it's all said and done. I'll show you how to put that back on here. Essentially what I have is a Romex connector, which is going to secure this wire inside the box. So down the road, if somebody comes along and accidentally pulls on the cable, they won't be able to yank the cable completely out of the box or pulling it out of the lugs that it's going to be connected to. I'm going to go ahead and shove this wire through. Now, for right now, the length of everything is not really as important. I'm not going to secure down on the screws to tighten this in, so I have ability to move this wire in and out for right now. So as I go to lay them up inside these lugs, I don't have to worry about it being too tight. I will make the final connections when we're all said and done. In this application, being 110 power, you're gonna have your black wire, which is gonna be your power wire, your white wire, which is your neutral wire, and then your green wire, which is gonna be your ground wire. Up here reflected on the box, you have something that's gonna be a little bit different. So L is considered line or line voltage, which is going to be your black wire, your power wire. N is your neutral, which is your white wire, which is going to take any unused power back to the box or complete the circuit. And then of course your ground is going to ground everything to one grounding rod to keep you safe while you're operating your equipment. So I'm going to go ahead and wire this all up now. You can do it any way you want. Just depends on how you can get your fingers in there to go ahead and make these connections. And so with this, you're gonna need to loosen up all of these lugs and back them all out. On this, normally what I'll do is I'll back them out pretty far. That way I'm not fidgeting with trying to get the wire locked into the lug that it's going into. So again, we're gonna take this green one and it's gonna go on the grounding screw. And we're gonna secure that one down and in. And then again, when you're tightening these lugs down, make sure that you tighten them down securely. There is some vibration in these panels and it can work loose over time. So when you think it's tight, just tighten it a tiny bit more. So then I'm gonna take the next two wires in line. The next one that goes in is gonna be the neutral wire or this white wire. And then the power wire will be last. And you just want to configure the wires in there so there's no loose wires coming up and out. Again, you don't want the power to jump from the one wire to the other wire. You want them to be secured completely inside of each of their lugs. So always the last thing you want to do after you get everything all secured in and you think that you're good, what I normally do is give a little tug on my wires to make sure that they are securely clamped in place. But then I will also double check to make sure that none of the bare copper is exposed outside of the lug. Okay, so as stated, I'm gonna give a little pull. Now you can give a little pull on each wire independently. You can pull on the whole cable. I recommend doing each wire because each wire was attached separately. But now that I know that my connections are secure, I'm gonna take a look in here and make sure that I don't have any bare copper exposed anywhere from that can cause a jump from one lug to the other, which essentially will short out your panel. Now that those are made, I'm gonna go ahead and just tuck this wire up out of the way for right now. Again, I'm not gonna secure this until I have it plugged in to my panel. And then once it's plugged in, then I'll go ahead and secure it after I route my wire in a way that's most inconspicuous as it can possibly be in most applications. And then whatever's extra, I'll go ahead and leave secured up here in the home for the 110 power bolt panel. The second part of this operation is to connect your low voltage wire from here to your shade. So this being a Lutron shade, this here has a separate plug and this plug comes off. This is what you're gonna wire this into, and then of course when you're done, you're gonna go ahead and secure it to this plug, and it's gonna give you the power that you need to the shade. When you're looking at a Lutron power plug. You can see that you have number 1 is your black, which is your ground. Number 2 is going to be your red, which is your power. And number 3 and 4 are going to be your data communication wires. We mentioned earlier that this one here is a wireless, so it has a wireless receiver connected to it. So these 2 data communication wires are to the wireless receiver and not back to the power panel itself, even though they're here in the plug. All we need to do is wire lug 1 and lug 2, and all the communication will be made available to the shade. So I'm going to go ahead and run this wire. Again, you want to look at your situation. In most applications, you're going to have a hole in the wall where a big chunk of many of these wires is going to be coming out of, and hopefully each one of these wires is labeled in the home to give you an idea of what room it goes to. It's not imperative that we know exactly which line goes to which shade, because they're all going to get powered. But when we come back to diagnose or track down some issues that may arise, knowing exactly which wire goes to which location is imperative. It can save you a lot of legwork, a lot of back and forth. In the application that they did not wire or label all the wires, what we do have is what's called a toner. A toner is a box that we can hook to each end of this wire and run down to the other end where the known wire comes out of the wall, and we can run a wand over it. And when we get to the one that is supplied with the noise from the toner, the other end of it will make the same noise. And then that way we can label that wire. We know it's coming directly from which window opening. It's time consuming. Very time consuming and tedious because it's a lot of back and forth. You got to strip the wires, hook up the toner, go to the power panel room, tone the wire, mark the wire, and then go rinse and repeat. And depending on how many openings you're doing, most common homes that are doing low voltage are anywhere from 10 to 25 openings. You have to do that many times in order to tone out all the wires and label them all. So when we work with electrical contractors, it's one of the things in the beginning part of the process what we like to point out is that when they run all their home runs back to the closet or wherever we're going to be mounting the power panel, that they take the time to label them by number or by location, and then that way we can put a reference to that exact wire. So with this wire in this application, being that everything's exposed for demonstration purposes for the customers that come into the showroom, I'm going to run this wire out of the bottom of the power panel, and I'm going to run it down along this crease, up, and then into the shade. It's going to be the cleanest application that I'm going to get away with having everything exposed. So I chose to knock out my knockout down here in the bottom of the power panel to give me access to these ports here where the power will be supplied. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So I still do use the same thing. I'm going to use a knockout in order to secure the wire, to keep somebody from unknowingly yanking it out of the live ports or plugs that are in here. And so I'll go ahead and run this guy up and through. And again, I know that I wired the power first, and some people may think that's odd. Why are you running the power line first? The reason that I run the power line first is because usually I can close up that upper and get it out of the way. But I'm also cognizant that it's not plugged in. And so I don't have to really worry about the power being plugged in by someone else. Typically I'll be the one that's working around the power panel. But for those of you out there that are nervous about working on a large job where the power panel, you may be away from it for long periods of time, and somebody that's in your group or unknowingly comes in and plugs it in, the worst that's going to happen typically is going to be that you're going to short the power panel. Being that it's low voltage power that's being transformed out of here, it's not enough to really hurt anybody other than the wallet when we have to replace the power panel. It's one of those things you want to be mindful of, and it's something that I'm fully aware of. And being that I'm standing in front of this, I know that nobody's going to come along and plug it in while I'm wiring it up. Lutron supplies you with power plugs, and you can see on here this is labeled 1 and 2. This 1 and 2 is going to reference, again, like we said up here on this plug. So number 1 is going to be your black wire, and number 2 is going to be your red. Now, one of the things that some of you may have picked up on already while I'm holding this wire up is that my wire is not black and red. And so what do you do in that application? Industry standard is that black is going to always be your ground wire, and any other color can be used as a power wire. Typically in low voltage it's going to be red to signify your power, but in this application, depending on whether or not you're using 16-2 speaker wire or power wire, there's no difference in costs, but they both sold the same way, and this one in particular is black and white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and number one is going to be black. So I'm going to go ahead and connect number one as black. And then again, there's little screws on top here. You want to make sure that you secure your wire completely. This does not have the issues if you had a not complete contact all the way buried inside there. Because again, it's been transformed to low voltage. It's not gonna really hurt anybody. The only thing it's gonna do is blow the transformer or the fuse. And then so once I tighten this one down, the last thing you wanna do with low voltage is not cut enough sheathing back and then go to tighten that clamp down, and it's actually clamping down on the sheathing versus the copper wire. You wanna make sure that you're making a good transmission or a good signal. I usually strip it back just a little bit so I have play with the wires. Some guys will strip it way back. It looks a little sloppy to me, and so I like to keep them nice and tight, but that's what a power plug should look like when it's wired in. And then this here is going to be pulled and plugged into any port. Doesn't matter, I can plug it into this port, I can plug it into the port below it. It really doesn't matter in the application. So it just depends on where you're running your shades to. A lot of guys will come in here and want to configure the box in a way that each one of these knockouts has a line that comes in and then goes right into here. Me, I would knock out the top three. I would run my connectors and run multiple lines through each knockout versus knocking every one of these out. It looks a little sloppy on the outside when you have too many knockouts opened up. So now that I have that wired in, I do like my panel to look somewhat pleasing. So I will spend a little bit of slack in here to give me my bow, but also tucked out of the way so they're not running past other power ports that are already mounted in there. After I'm done doing that, then this one here I can secure. This wire here I ran really long so I can accommodate for run that I need to make up to the shade. So when I clamp these down, this will secure this wire, and then you can tighten down on these completely, and this will lock that wire in. Like I said, it's not a big deal at the end of the day. If this one in particular was not secured 100% and somebody yanked this out, being it's just low voltage, it's not really going to cause any major issues other than destroy a panel from being tripped out. So now that is secured in there. You have a couple of different ways that you can attach the wiring to an opening. What we prefer to use are zip ties. Actually, they're called mounting zip ties. So you can zip tie the wire, and then it gives you this little round hole to run a screw through to secure it to the opening. You never want to leave wires just haphazardly laying around. You want to have some sort of fit and finish to them. So being that I have this power wire that's coming out of the box now, I can figure out what I want to do as far as plugging this into the outlet, and then how much room I want to move back so I can secure this and have this a clean install. So right about there, that looks like it's going to be the right amount of space to be plugged into the outlet. So then I can go ahead now and secure this up here and lock this down. Make sure that when you're tightening down, there's a little nub in here. Make sure that it's inside there. You can tighten it down where it's outside of there. It can actually put pressure on and pierce the sheathing and the cable, which would liven this box up quite a bit to the next person that would touch it. And now that we are secure, I'm going to go ahead and take this initial zip tie, and depends on how you're gonna run the screws in. I'm gonna run them in an application here that they sit nice in the opening. For all you guys out there that wanna tell me about the straight cutters and the side cutters, I know. Hopefully nobody touches this and cuts themselves. All right, so then I'm gonna go ahead and take this here and I want to secure this back here along the power panel. Again, always leave a little bit of slack in your wire. You never want to have super tight wires because you're putting stress on the wire. Just going to tighten it up. Now, if it's drywall, as long as when you're running these cable connectors, as long as you sneak up on the wall and not ramrod it in, that's enough grip to hold the screw in. You don't need to use an anchor to complete this application. And so I'm gonna pull this one down, and what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna connect these two together and then run these two together until they can no longer be run together, and then at which time I'll separate the two and run them independently. This just cleans up the wiring. And the data application, if you're running data, some people may say when you're running the 110 next to the transform 12 volt, is there a data signal issue? No, the cable that's supplied has a shield to stop any transmission from transferring from one cable to the next. Run that down, always look at what you're doing. Make sure it looks clean. I'm gonna go ahead and carry on because I can't make this connection point yet until I plug into the power panel securely. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this part of the cable and I'm gonna move on to securing this one. So then what I'm gonna do, because nobody wants to wire all the way up here. I don't wanna cut and strip wires all the way up here. I know that my wire is coming out from the shade here, and I know that the plug that I'm gonna be plugging into is gonna go also connect into here. So what I'm gonna do is take a measurement based upon where I need my plug to come out. And when I install my plug, I'm gonna have it come out right about here. So now that I know where this is, and you can mark this, but now that I know where this is, I can bring it back down here where it's a little bit more comfortable to do the cutting and the stripping on the wire. And then go ahead and take care of that. So I'll go ahead and cut away the excess. I'm gonna go ahead and strip back only what I need and nothing more to make it easier to work with when I'm inserting the ends into the plugs. The difference between this and the wire in the power panel is gonna have a beauty plate that goes over it, covers it up. This wire up here is going to be exposed, so when you're standing underneath the shade, when the shade is fully raised, some of the wiring may be seen, but at that weird angle where you're actually standing underneath the window looking up into it, there's no way to really avoid some of the wiring that's going to come out of the back of the shade. This is going to be the plug that's going to connect to this plug here to power the shade. We have, again, number 1, number 2, 3, and 4. We're only worried about 1 and 2 in this application, so I'm going to go ahead and secure the black to number 1, and then the white into number 2. And the shorter you make these cables, sometimes the harder it is to bend them in and get them in there correctly without the cord fraying up or some of the copper coming out loose. So whatever you need to work with, if you need to just strip another, ½ inch or an inch off of here to make it a little easier to wire up these power plugs, especially when you're going to be doing 40 or 50 in a day, when you're doing multiple shade applications. Sometimes it's just a little easier and quicker to do so. Okay, so now that I have this in here, I'm gonna go ahead and make the connection between the shade and the power panel. This comes with a little clip. So Lutron supplies a little spade clip. This essentially just has some prongs, and then it slides into the plug that's wired from the manufacturer, like so. And then what that does is just gives you a mounting base to mount to the upper part of the opening and secure it. So the next thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and secure this zip tie. The one thing I really want to do when I'm securing this zip tie is to try and secure the wire as much as possible in order to lock it in place and have it fill up, because you don't want to use a ton of these mounting cable straps. It gets a little sloppy if you use too many of them. And so with this one here, okay, and then that pulls it nice and taut, so when in the opening it's not hanging, it's not really sloppy. There's some small final adjustments that you can do it to kind of get it a little bit tighter over time. And then the last thing would be to make this final connection here from the shade. Now, what you'll notice is see how there's a little bit of slack in here from right here to the shade? You want to have that slack. Don't ever make it tight. If the shade needs to be pulled out of the opening or changed, or the shade comes out of the brackets, which I've seen somebody hanging on it or it going up cockeyed or telescoping, it can pull it out of the brackets. And if you make that too tight, there's no play in the wire, and it can break the connections really easily. When you're running low voltage, if you break the wire right next to the opening and you make it too short, you have to run a new wire. So you can't extend the wire, and if it's inside the wall where you have it stripped all the way back to, you have no ability to make any adjustments or in future. So be mindful of when you're installing this stuff. Always think about what's going to happen that day on that repair when you're going to have to go in and correct something. Again, we're just looking for clamping, so we don't want to run up a bunch of anchors in here. Now I can go back down here. Now that everything's all connected, I can make my final connection with my power and bring my power panel live. What you're going to see is an orange light. As it slowly starts to communicate and starts to build up, each one of these lights for each port will start to light up independently, as you see now. This is telling me that all ports have been lit up. There's no issues with any of the wiring. This is telling you that I made the full connection inside. And then so now it's ready to receive the command from the shade. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to pair a Lutron shade to the Pico transmitter. And I'm going to go ahead and button this all up, and then we'll see you back here in a minute for that video.